I gave up coffee for green tea on a Tuesday for a reason that had nothing to do with sleep. My wife had been given a tin of it, and neither of us wanted it going to waste, so I said I would drink it in the afternoons for a fortnight, and I fully expected to hate it. I did hate it, for about 4 days. What I was not expecting, and what I want to talk about, is what started happening at 11 at night about 3 weeks later. I had spent the best part of a decade assuming my sleep had simply gone the way sleep goes, and that this was the deal now, and that the only thing left was to manage it. Turns out I had been holding one end of a rope I did not know I was holding. Now, I'm going to be careful with this, because there is a version of this story where a man tells you a leaf fixed his life and then sells you the leaf. That is not what happened, and I have nothing to sell you. No miracle cures, no scare stories, nothing to buy, just what's actually true. The change was real, and the reason for it turned out to be far more boring than green tea and considerably more useful, because the boring reason applies to you whether you ever touch a cup of tea in your life. And the thing that surprised me most was not the sleep at all. It was what happened to my afternoons. I have left that one until last because it is the reason I never went back. Maybe you are tired at 9 and wide awake at 11. Maybe you get into bed perfectly ready and something switches back on the moment the light goes off. Maybe the sleep arrives fine and then sits shallow, and you surface 3 or 4 times without ever properly waking. That middle one was mine for years, and I put it down to having too much on my mind. I thought that was just age. It wasn't. The part I had never actually counted. What was in the day before I changed anything? If you had asked me how much coffee I drank, I would have said a few cups, and I would have believed it. So I wrote it down for a week, which I recommend to nobody who wants to go on feeling good about themselves. 2 before 8 in the morning, 1 at about 9:30, alongside whatever I was doing. 1 after lunch, always, and that one was not a decision, it was punctuation. And then 1 at about 4, which is the one I would have sworn to you was harmless. That is 5, and on a bad day 6, and the last of them landing in the middle of the afternoon. I should say that when I saw the list written out, I did not have a moment of clarity about it. My first reaction was to argue with the paper. I told myself the 10:30 one barely counted because it went cold, and that the after-lunch one was small, and that a week with a lot on in it was not a fair week to measure. All of which is what a man says when he does not want the number to be the number. Here's the part that changed how I looked at that list. Caffeine does not leave you when the cup is empty. It hangs about for hours, and a fair amount of it is still in you 5 or 6 hours later, which means the 4 o'clock cup is still doing business at 10 at night. And the bit nobody had told me is that this gets slower as we get older. The same cup, the same amount, sitting in me longer than it did when I was 40, because the body clears it at a gentler pace now. Nothing about my habit had changed. The arithmetic underneath the habit had changed, quietly, without telling me. And this is why it is so easy to miss. There is no day where it goes wrong. There is no morning where you wake up and think, that is it, the afternoon coffee is turned against me. It shifts by a few minutes a year, and a few minutes a year over 20 years is a different drink arriving at a different time in a different body, while you go on calling it the same cup. I had a guest who used to leave after dinner and had started staying until midnight, and I never noticed because he always arrived at the same time. That is the whole idea, and if you take nothing else from this, take that one. You did not get worse at sleeping. The same afternoon, cup started costing more than it used to. What the swap actually changed, and what it did not. So, the tea. I did not plan any of this as an experiment, which is probably why it worked, because the experiments I planned tend to last 9 days. The rule was simply that after lunch it was tea, and before lunch I carried on exactly as I was, coffee and all, because I was not trying to be a better person, I was trying to use up a tin. 2 things happened, and only one of them is about tea. The first is that green tea has caffeine in it too, which surprised a lot of people I have since mentioned this to, but it has considerably less, roughly a third of what was in the coffee I was drinking. So my afternoon went from a full dose to a small one, without me deciding to cut down and without any of the ceremony of giving something up. The second is that the 4 o'clock cup moved earlier on its own because the tea was less of an event, and I stopped needing it as a marker in the day. Between them, the caffeine sitting in me at bedtime dropped a long way, and that is the entire mechanism. It was not the tea. It was less caffeine arriving earlier. I want to say that plainly, because if the tea were the point, I would be telling you to buy tea. And the honest version is that you could get the same result with a smaller coffee, or the same coffee an hour earlier, or by making the afternoon one decaf and keeping the ritual exactly as it is. The ritual was never the problem. I still have the mug, I still stop what I am doing, I still stand at the window with it. For the first week, the headaches were real, in the late afternoon, and they were not dramatic, but they were there. If you go at this all at once, you will get those, and you will blame the wrong thing and go back. Move it in stages instead. Make the afternoon one half coffee and half decaf for a fortnight before you touch anything else, and let it be dull. What I did not see coming. The afternoon, not the night. The sleep changed slowly, over about 3 weeks, in a way I did not notice at the time and only saw looking backwards. But the thing I actually noticed first was earlier in the day, and it is the reason I never went back. I had assumed the afternoon coffee was holding me up, that around 3 the day sagged, and the cup was the thing that carried me over it, and that without it, I would be finished by 4. What happened was the opposite. The sag got smaller. It took me an embarrassing amount of time to even register that, because I was watching the nights and not the afternoons. What gave it away was that I stopped looking at the clock at 2:30. I had been doing that for years without knowing I did it. The way you check a pocket for keys. Not gone. And I still get a flat patch after lunch like everybody else. But the version where I was fighting my way through the late afternoon with a mug in my hand quietly stopped. When I read about it afterwards, the explanation made an annoying amount of sense. The lift you get from that cup is not really a lift. A good deal of it is you clearing the dip that the last cup left behind, which means the afternoon coffee was partly a solution to a problem that the morning coffee had created. And once the whole chain shortened, there was less dip to fix. So the cup I was most protective of, the one I would have defended hardest if you had come for it, was largely there to repair damage done by the cups before it. I am not saying coffee does nothing, because that is plainly untrue, and I would be overcorrecting. On a genuinely short night, it does what it says on the tin, and on those days, I still reach for it. What I am saying is that most of my afternoons were not genuinely short nights. They were ordinary days in which I had built a small hill and then spent money climbing it. I had been running alone and calling it energy. That was the bit that made me keep going long after the novelty of the tin had worn off. Not better nights, though those came. Better 4 o'clocks, the honest part. What this did not do. It was not dramatic, and I am not going to dress it up. I did not start sleeping like a young man, and I still have bad nights. And the bad nights still turn up without a reason attached. What changed is that I stopped lying there awake and puzzled at 11. And the nights got a little deeper rather than a lot longer. It took about 3 weeks before anything shifted, and if I had judged it at day 9, I would have called it nonsense and gone back to coffee. There is nothing magic about green tea, and I would be careful with anybody who tells you otherwise because the useful part here is free and slightly boring. It is the amount, and it is the time of day, and the tea was just the thing that made me change both without noticing. If you love your coffee, keep it. Keep all of it in the morning, where it costs you almost nothing. And if you are sleeping badly and there is no caffeine anywhere in your afternoon, then this whole video is not about you. And I would rather say that than have you rearrange a habit that was never the problem. If the sleep is genuinely broken, if you are waking unrefreshed no matter what you do, or somebody has told you that you stop breathing at night, that is a conversation for your own doctor, and it is worth having sooner rather than later. That is the one thing I cannot see from where I am sitting. If there is something you want explained without the drama, leave it in the comments. I read every single one. A like on this one helps it find other people our age who have been blaming their sleep for something their afternoon was doing. I spent a decade thinking my sleep had changed. My sleep was fine. The 4 o'clock cup had got heavier, and nobody told me. Here is to the healthy living years.